Hi guys, welcome to another session with Elevate today. And today we have Steve, Satyajeet, who are going to be the panelists for today, and I will be the moderator. I'm Sinduja. I am a PM from Microsoft. I've been in the industry for close to 10 years now, PM close to 6 years. But enough about me. Let's talk about the panelists. I'm going to introduce both Satyajeet and Steve. So we have Satyajeet Salgar today, and he's a director at Google, and he's had numerous product teams across Google. He's been leading them for multiple years now, including search, YouTube, Play, Discover, and payments. He has experiences both scaling and growing multiple billion plus MAU, monthly active user products today, and taking products from zero to one. And prior to Google, he's worked with a few startups in Silicon Valley, and he's here with us today to share all of his experiences and wonderful insights. So thank you, Satyajeet. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Steve is the CEO, the Chief Operating Officer of Career Direct, and they specialize in management consulting and tech development focused on transportation, logistics, and supply chain. He has a world of startup experience, and he's also a lot of experience on taking products from zero to one. He's been a founder, he's been a mentor, or he's continuing to be a mentor, an entrepreneur, and angel investor for multiple products. And he's with us today to share his product knowledge that he has gathered across the years, across the industry, across the life cycle. So thank you, Steve. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Sinduja. That I was wondering who you were introducing, but that sounded good.
That's all you. All right. So without further ado, I guess let's get started, with the questions. I have quote unquote easy questions planned for you guys. So let's get started. So this is probably for no one in particular. So feel free, like if this resonates with you, like just take it away. So I guess we're here to talk about, um, like reaching success through product engineering, right? And so what I'm going to do today is I have a few questions that's going to be specific to reaching success through product engineering and how product has played a role in making engineering more successful, if you will. And how have you seen the transition from being more engineering driven to more product driven, product led growth, product led organization, and all of that. So we'll touch upon like all of these different things today. So with that, I'll start off with the first question that I have. So, what important product-led trend do you think we'll be talking about in the near future? Because this question, like, think about it as broken up into multiple segments, if you will. If you want to talk about like what sort of a product-led growth or product-led ideas you've seen in the past, how have they changed to now, and then what are you seeing now, which will change to future? I think if you can lay it out that way, I think that would be really great.
Steve, you want to kick things off?
Yeah, I can give my perspective, and you stop me, Satyajit. I can go on and on.
Yeah.
But I think next year's conference is going to be exciting because I mean, when I look at the way things have prospered or progressed in the product industry or in the we call it industry, but it's actually a profession or a role that people play. And I'm excited and amazed at how this is transforming to a world where everything is product now. Even a company is a product. So I'm really happy. 20 years ago, people would not talk about product in this fashion. It would be consumer packaged goods, which was a product. But today we're talking about software as a product. And what that does is it creates challenges in terms of roles, right? And I'll talk about that one specific trend that I'm seeing. Roles can be in the product domain, can be you can be a product manager, you can be a product owner. And if you are in the services business, productized services, it could be project manager, program manager. What I've started to see is that has created complexity and confusion around roles, ownership, and responsibilities. And I think what we'll see in the next year is a resolution of some of that, right? Because you'll start to see some of these roles cascade or collapse into maybe one clear role. We'll see more clarity in what's expected from a product owner. We'll see more clarity about what's expected in the deliverables. And I'm very excited at how this is transforming. And there's a lot more I can say, but Satyajit,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
hand it off to you.
One thing that you said really resonated with me, Steve, which is I think the evolution of all of this, right? Like I think it's useful to talk about next year. I think it's useful to talk about the past, right? Like I think
Right.
to your point, right? Like um, a lot of this, if you think about a lot of the successful companies, right, they initially had, we think of like, okay, you're successful because you have a marketing or a sales advantage, right? To Steve's point, he said this thing about everything is a product, even like, sort of like I remember when I was in business school, like they told us, oh, imagine if you had to sell yourself, what would you do? I feel like now when you give that analogy to people, you're like, okay, imagine if you thought of yourself and your career as a product, how would you think about it, right? So I think the way we're thinking about things fundamentally has changed. And I think like companies and products have changed, right? So you had people used to think about, okay, what's your marketing advantage? Then at some point, I think you sort of had this sense of like, what is the technical advantage that this product has that allows it to be successful? Now, increasingly, we think about it as, is there a design or understanding thing that this product has that you understand consumers better? There's an elegance of design. There's a way to bring community into it, and I think like the this product skill is sort of knowing how all of this is evolving and sort of being able to integrate it into it's a discipline, as Steve said, right? And I think a lot of it now is having an understanding of all of this is changing. And I think like the thing that resonated with me, Steve, the second thing you said is you go in waves and sort of waves of this thing, right? Which is sometimes like the the function is very distributed, so you have it very specialized. To your point, like you have program managers, you have product managers, you have go to market PMs, you have technical program. Like you have a lot of segmentation. In other cases, they go like, okay, wait, this doesn't make sense. We're going to merge these a little bit. And I think yeah, that I think that push and pull sort of always exists. Yeah,
Yeah,
No,
is
totally,
that
that's
a,
totally,
amazing.
totally
uh,
agree.
Yeah, it's actually really cool. Like and as I said, when I started, like I introduced myself as being in the industry or product management industry for close to 6 years now. And I should say, even within the 6 years, I've seen the transition. That we started thinking more along the lines of rather than saying, hey, I have a solution, like let's go sell it now. We are tipping it over and being like, what problem are you trying to solve? And that's the first and foremost question you're asking. Even if it's a small feature within a product, you're like, think about the feature as a product. What problem are you trying to solve?
yeah,
So
the
that's
best
a feeling.
Yeah, the best phrase I've heard is you need to have a culture of product, and I
Yeah,
think it's the
Absolutely.
job of like the product owner to maintain that culture. And but the ideas can come from all over. Like there's a fluidity between people that's really important. I think that sort of needs to be a company culture thing, less a job function thing. I think.
Absolutely.
totally agree. Totally agree. The product thing is, product is discipline. And when you think product, you think discipline. Totally agree with you, Satyajit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing. Okay, I'm going to move on. This is actually really a question for the both of you, if you will, right? So again, pick whoever wants to go first. That's totally up to you guys. But if you were to give yourself one piece of advice to your younger self when you first started in this product management journey, as very young product manager, and then you've evolved into being product leaders, what would it be? And yeah, actually, if there is a continuation to the question, I'll probably ask later. But let's start with this.
Go ahead, Satyajit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I can use up. I'd say one thing is, especially when I started, I'd say a few things. The first is be much more curious, right? Like of how things work. Like I think it's a natural sort of thing required for the job, but I wish I was even more so, like explore different things. Um, I had underestimated how important people are as part of the job. I think initially when I started, I sort of said like, oh, it's important for me to like understand the market, the product, the customer needs. Um, a lot of what you do as a product manager is, especially even early on, is you influence people. You sort of convince people that you have no authority over to do things because you think they're important. You learn. So I think that I wish I knew that was the case. The third thing that I sort of figured out later is I've seen PMs bend the job based on their skill set and what they're interested in. And I'd always thought of like, okay, there's a skill set associated with the job, and I need to like build that skill set. I wish I'd thought about it a little bit differently early on, and I feel like I'm a lot more comfortable with that now. compared to when I started. So yeah, I think those three things would be the advice I'd give myself.
Awesome. Steve, what about you?
Yeah,
If you
totally
would
agree with
give.
Sat. Totally agree with Satyajit. The people aspect is something that you learn over time, and then you naturally adapt and grow. My to build on that, I would say that if I would go back, a few years and tell myself what I would do differently, it would be really, not to get hung up on, the whole product development, product management cycle, right? Not be an idealist about it. I would tell myself, learn, learn, learn. Basically, the whole product cycle can influence your life. I mean, I'm thinking somewhere it's implicit to me, and my life is now a part of, everything is an MVP in my life. And I think in terms of MVP 0.1, MVP 1.0, 2.0, to a point where I drive a few people crazy. But it's just a mindset, right? It's really about iterating and perfecting the product over time, and not really trying to do it in the first go, right? So eat the elephant, one bite at a time, change the world one day at a time. You can do more. And I'm borrowing from someone else, but basically it's like, you can do more in 10 years than what you can do in a year. So be patient about the product cycle. Products can take years, and not everyone is going to be a unicorn overnight. Everyone jumps into product management thinking they're building the next big unicorn. I would say stay true to the purpose. That's what I've learned, and I wish I had done that. So I would say that it's a learning I will take with me as I go.
That's awesome. No, thank you. I think I'll just add one little thing. I guess this was something that I learned maybe a couple of years ago. My son is 2 year old, and before this, it's like just me and my husband, so which means we had all the time. So I could stay and work longer and longer and longer if I wanted to. But what I've learned is, as you said, probably Steve, this resonates with a little bit more of what you said. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint,
It's
right?
yeah,
And so
exactly.
you need to know where to draw the line and say, okay, this is the. Well, I've also learned a new phrase. It's MLP rather than MVP. It's the
Right,
most lovable product, I think.
right,
Like
right.
the
Absolutely.
where you can draw the line where you met the customer's pain point for that particular time, right?
Right.
And you're like, okay, it's done. Like let's ship and let's reiterate. It's that's
Totally.
that's that's I think something that I'm probably going to take for future as well, because yeah, burnout is real. Um,
I'm going to steal your phrase MLP, if you don't mind.
no, of course. I think I stole it from somebody. So,
Okay.
well, it's
I'll definitely
and
use
he's
it with my
great.
team.
Oh, absolutely, great artist steal. So don't worry. Okay, let's move on. The other question I had for you guys is, I guess, more than an advice or whatever it is. So, if you were to go into a room today, right, and if you were to give advice to the people as you are doing today, um, pick maybe one or two do and don'ts that you'd want to emphasize on from a product engineering standpoint based on your experience.
I can go in first. I think in the early stages, I would say, of a product, stay true to your hypothesis, whatever that is about the product. Whether it's a problem you're solving or creating an opportunity, I would start with the don't compromise on the reason that you started work on this idea, right? Or this product. Oftentimes, I know it's important to manage. There's always conflicting priorities. There are, you know, key people, customers who come in and want to change things. And most product teams do have to compromise. I use the word compromise not lightly. But the do in this case, I would say, as an advice, and I've tried to practice and I try to do it even today, is try and hold your ground around some core principles or some kind of a contract. I call it a contract. Decide upfront how much you're willing to be flexible with your feature roadmap, and what you're willing to deprioritize, reprioritize, and compromise on. Because I think that's a what I call a constant negotiation between the roadmap team and the services team or the sales teams. And when you get to a product market fit and you get into a mass volume growth, that's when you start to see a lot of the pressure. So that's one do and don't that I can think of. Satyajit.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd say that the do part is. I'd say the most important thing is continuously maintaining sort of this customer empathy, right? Like I worry in a weird way, people people that are building the thing sometimes use the thing the least. And I've seen this consistently where there's a product I was on many years ago. where the leader of the team at some point just asked, it was an advertiser-based product, right? And so the person said, okay, who's actually used this? Like, who knows what the issues are? And there were people that were in the room building this for years. They're like, oh, we're not advertisers. Like, how would we? And so I think this notion of like finding ways to, like, your job as product owner is to have like a pulse on your users, and you can get that through data, you can get that through talking to people, you can get that to whatever it is. And I think the risk is people do it at one point at an early stage of the
Mm,
product, and then they sort of just lose it.
right.
And I think this discipline of like continuously, because I think that's how you maintain advantage. That's how you get new ideas. I think like that to me is a do, especially like at all stages of a product. Finding ways to maintain that.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. I think I have one last question. If there are, once we are done with this, I'll probably just jump into the Q&A. I see like a lot of questions in the Q&A section as well. So if you were to talk about the evolution of product-led growth, over the last few years, over the last few decades, um, is there a product or is there anything that comes to mind that you guys have worked in the past, which has contributed or has been a good example of product-led growth, if you will?
Mm, good example. I think it's hard. I think the problem is there's so many examples. But let me say a couple of things, right? Especially the things that I worked on. Most of them have been sort of product led growth, right? Like sort of there some notion of the product provided value, so people used it more versus this notion of like acquisition driven growth specifically around a product that's working. I think the best way to think about it is I think a phrase that I've heard. I heard it at some point when I was at YouTube a long time ago, which is most of like product building is building so that you can find moment of insights. Like, oh, I get this thing, which is like I built stuff, and I found that by building it, people really liked it. So this is something to double down on and something that's useful for the world. I think I used to see this a lot more in startups and tech companies, and I feel like that is much more commonly acceptable now. I feel like I think the evolution that I've seen is this notion of we're going to try things, and people, we're going to see how people react to it. We're going to see how the ecosystem reacts to it, and it's okay if like it's kind of expected that some things don't work and some things do. Which I think like when I think back to when I started my career in product, like that wasn't the case, right? You were supposed to sort of do all the work up front and and sort of launch it and hope and sort of make it succeed. So I'd say that to me is sort of one of the things. And when I think about things like when I think about most of the products I've worked on, whether it's search or YouTube, they seem to have that piece, which is sometimes we're building in public to like try things.
Yeah, That's a great story, Satyajit. Sinduja, I have a lot of examples. I'll use one that I have right now, which is a product that we are building in our company, Carrier Direct, and it's called Socket. It started off as more of a problem that we were trying to solve for one of our clients and one of our partners. Right, P44 is one of our core partners, a visibility platform, and what we were trying to do was figure out how we can integrate between the product and multiple carrier systems, right? And that product can be really complex. And what we discovered was something small that we were building has suddenly become an ecosystem problem. And this whole digital transformation wave and COVID has forced companies to adapt. So I would say that the product itself created a business case, and what we are seeing is the product is leading the growth of probably a completely new vertical. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we're busy trying to build something that we were thinking was just a small tool, but it's turning out to be a platform. So that's an example. I think a lot of clients that I work with and companies I consult with, they are seeing the same challenge. Industry leaders, companies that are leading their industry, are being forced to think product rather than let's just solve a problem for a client anymore. It's like let's people are being forced to think differently, which is exciting for people like us.
That's awesome. No, that's really cool. And I think just adding on a little bit more to like what Satyajit was also saying, I think it really helps to kind of think about everything that you do as a hypothesis,
Right.
right? So you're either validating or invalidating the hypothesis end of the day, but you're going in with the mindset of, hey, this is what I think, and this is what like multiple signals are telling me. Let's figure out if it works or not. If it doesn't, then let's change course. If it does, then we've hit gold. So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's
no,
my
that's
favorite.
amazing.
You said my favorite word, hypothesis. I call it an I think everything is an evolving hypothesis, right? And you just have to calibrate. You just have to
No,
constantly
everything is
calibrate.
absolutely no, everything is. I think I kind of go back to the example of all of us have the intention is right, right? When we
Yep.
go into like
Yep.
product development or whatever it is, the intention is right. So how you do it, I think, is what to define the outcome. So your how you it turns out to be the hypothesis itself. So yep,
Absolutely. Totally agree.
awesome, awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. I those were all the questions I had. Thank you for entertaining all of the questions. Now I'm going to switch gears to the Q&A section of the questions that we have from participants. I'll pick the one that has the most votes up top, and that's from Maxi. And Maxi is asking, so if you use Scrum methodologies in your day to day within Career Direct or at Google, do you respect the fundamentals 100%, or do you adapt them to your current needs? And if you have an example of how you adapted, if you adapted, that would be great.
So most teams I've been on don't use Scrum. So at least broadly at Google, we don't use Scrum. Each team sort of does its own thing. One or two teams I've been on have tried it, and I think one team sort of liked it but adapted it to its own sort of very specific norms. Another team rejected it almost instantly. So I don't have like sort of particular adaptations that I think would be useful. I do think you end up having to find the thing that works for your team though.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Great one, Satyajit. I agree. I remember this was about 15, 16 years ago when I really got introduced to Agile. The whole Martin Fowler ideology of Agile methodology and Scrum and Extreme. And I remember at that point in time, it was more, hey, let's be true to the principles, first principles, and build according to that. But I think that the world has moved significantly ahead from that in the last 15 years. I've had the good fortune to work with companies like ThoughtWorks and others, who do a little bit of pure play. But then what I've seen and in my teams, we've developed our own flavor of Agile and Scrum, right?
Yes.
So we follow the
Yes.
first principles. We use a Jira board. Everything is in terms of being nimble and agile like not only in principle but also in reality, and not just
Yes.
do things because we want to do it that way, but more about why don't we take the best of what's in those principles but deliver on outcomes. And while we don't really rigorously drive deadline driven life cycle kind of programming, it's really about iterate and build, feedback and test, learn from what we've done, and then constantly evolve the product. That's what I've seen.
No, that's amazing. I think very similar example from my end as well. We yeah, we do not, as you said, maybe taking a leaf from your book, Steve. It's not about following the to the T, the book to the T, right? You kind of take the principles and evolve it to whatever works best for your team. And I
Absolutely.
take very similar examples across like all of the prioritization methodologies as well. I've had people ask me, so do you use Moscow? Do you use Rice? I'm like, we use Sinduja's prioritization, I guess. So I mean, it's all about like evolving and adapting to the particular team and the particular need and the particular problem you're trying to solve,
Right.
rather than sticking to the books. So absolutely awesome. Thank you.
Well said.
Okay,
Well said.
moving on. The second question we have is from Almas. So how do you balance research and validation with execution? And do you feel that validation and research should be done by the same person before going to execution?
Um, when you're talking about research and validation, like again, there are different philosophies. I'm assuming this is in terms of the whole lean product canvas concept, right? And so I'm thinking market research for the product, go to market research, establishing product market fit. You're talking about that. And I feel that there has to be a different team that leads. This is my hypothesis, and I've seen it work well. there has to be a different team that builds and validates that and brings it to the product team, and then the product team takes it and makes it their own, because eventually the product team has to own that, and take it to the next step. Now, it depends. Again, I don't want to say that there's a certain way to do this. It depends on different industries. It depends on different markets. Because I mean, sometimes the product team doesn't have the knowledge, subject matter expertise that a particular industry or a product problem has or requires. So I would say it's relative, but usually it's good when there's a body of research done by a neutral party or a neutral group, and then brought to the product team to then dissect and build. Those are my thoughts. Satyajit, would love to hear what you
Yeah,
think.
I've well, I'll offer a counter view, but also like agree with you a little bit, which is I think it's um, I found that it's ideal if the team that is building the thing also is involved in the research of it. I think sometimes it's a different function, right? So sometimes
Sure.
you need
Yeah.
UX researchers, sometimes you need prototypers that are just better at like building quick prototypes and getting them out. But I think if you completely disconnect it from the product team, I find incentives change, right? Which
Right.
is
Right.
which
Right.
is and I think I found that like then like sort of uh, I actually find people are sort of most excited to like sort of have the thing go end to end, right? So I try and when we're building things, I find some of the most exciting thing is having the engineers that will eventually build it watch user prototyping sessions and all of that stuff, right? So everyone feels a sense of ownership of what you're building end to end. I think the question of like execution and validation is a good one, right? What percentage of the team is doing this? Is everyone doing it? What's the handoff like? Um, and I think that part again varies with the stage of the product. I'd say for something more mature, like the reality is a large part of the team like might be working on sort of keeping the existing thing running. For something smaller, I think you can have the whole team working on sort of figuring out what you're trying to do. So I'd say the percentage varies with the maturity of the product. I think in an ideal world, you want certainly the same product team, ideally parts of the same engineering team, paired with prototypers and UXers and researchers to like sort of research and validate as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
No, that's perfect. I think it's also kind of one of the main things, as you said, Satyajit, of um, understanding the people more, right? So you as a product, you as a stakeholder need to bring all of these different disciplines together and make sure everybody understands the value proposition behind all of the things that's happening, right? And that needs to go end to end, right? And unless the product manager is not involved in either like product market research or even the user research or UX research or whatever it is, and you haven't bought into the particular idea, I kind of find it like falling off the cliff and not being able to connect the dots together. Yeah,
yeah, no,
no,
I
I
agree.
totally agree. So, thank you so much for your time, guys. Those were all the time. That was the time we had for all the questions. I know there is a lot of questions in the Q&A, so I guess we might have some time to go back to the lounge and answer these questions. But thanks again for everybody who attended. Thank you, Satyajit. Thank you, Steve. It was amazing meeting you guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
you. It's great
Sinduja.
talking.
Yeah. Thank you, Satyajit. It was nice talking to you guys.